Hello and welcome to another episode of the Football Frenemies podcast, a Jonesing for Sports affiliate podcast strictly covering college football from the perspective of a Wolverine fan, myself, Brandon, and a Buckeye fan, Cody Thomas over there. Today we're talking about the ACC. We're going to preview the conference, see who's going to maybe pop this year, maybe make a playoff appearance. We'll see. I know Cody's super high on Florida State. Don't interrupt me. We're also going to recap our last episode. I know a lot of people had some issues with the audio, so we'll give you a short recap. We might also have some spicy hot takes about the NFL draft and the combine and just how important it is. And if we have time, we're going to get into some spring game reactions from Ohio State and Michigan. So before we get on into it, Cody, how are you doing today?
I'm hanging in there, man. It has been a really, really long spring. I think I've been out of town for 5 of the last 7 weekends. In the heart of club soccer season right now. As for high school, my high school team, we're literally in the middle of our strength and conditioning program right now. So it's been very go, go, go. And that's not even talking about my main job, working with my youth ministry. It's been good, but it's been very busy. Normally, I'm like very locked in to college football things, just like all the time. But I won't lie. I have had to make sure to be disciplined to keep up with the stories. Like, I've been struggling so much that I've even listened to Josh Pate more than normal, just because I'm like in the car driving somewhere and I'm like, all right, it's recommended a video. I at least got to know what's going on with this topic, even though I know he's wrong. So,
well, today we're going to kind of reel you back into the college football atmosphere, hopefully in a less frustrating way. Let's just, for the people, as I mentioned in the intro, our last pod, we talked about the Pac-12. You were very passionate, and unfortunately our audio quality was not up to par, so probably the average listener didn't get through that pod. Would you give us maybe a minute or two recap of the Pac-12 and where we were at?
For me personally, I have a belief that the Pac-12 not only has a chance to be the second best conference next year, but I think it actually has a chance to be the best conference head to toe. I think it's very obvious that no conference has a 1-2 punch like Alabama and Georgia. You know, Ohio State and Michigan are very close, but they haven't proven in the last 5 to 7 years that we can get over that hump. But I think the Pac-12 is poised to do it because of the returning production they have at quarterbacks. It's insane, the quarterbacks that are going to be in that conference, with Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams at USC. Bo Nix is back at Oregon. Michael Penix, a Heisman frontrunner, is up there at Washington. You've got Cam Rising back at Utah. You've got DJ Uiagalelei, who is going to be at Oregon State. And that's just the top of it. There's even more. But I think their quarterback play is going to be stellar. And we have seen in college football how when you're not going against the very elite teams, quarterbacks can really just win the day for you. And I think the Pac-12 is set up very well to be a team that is in contention for multiple teams to make the playoffs, multiple teams to make New Year's Six bowls and other bowls, and then for them to be very successful throughout the season and in the postseason.
So I think we have not potted for about a month now. It sounds like you have not come down from that crazy take that they could be the best conference, which, hey, stick to your guns. I respect that. I was definitely on the other side of that one. Definitely agree the quarterback play is going to be intriguing, but I got them maybe middle, like third best in the country. I cannot place the Pac-12 on the same stratosphere of the SEC or the Big Ten, and I think that the Big 12 is a very, very competitive conference, just like the Pac-12. So I'll be watching them maybe a little bit more, but I'm not quite on that hype train. Let's just put it out there. We don't have to lock it in, but do you have a playoff team coming from the Pac-12 next year?
Yes, and I think it's the Oregon Ducks.
Ooh, that's a spicy take. What is leading you to think the Oregon Ducks are going to be better than, let's say, USC or Washington?
I think they're the most complete team, especially defensive side. I think that's going to help them be able to carry the day, and I think that's what would help them to be the most competitive, even though, ironically, I saw the matchup between them and Georgia at the beginning of last season. But I think that Oregon team was young and they had a brand new coach for the first time, and Bo Nix was in a new system. College football, teams that start the year are very rarely teams that finish the year. And they've got some good pieces on defense. They've got some good additions in the transfer portal. They've got a ton of people coming back. And I think they're the most complete team, So I think that, because a lot of these Pac-12 teams, when you got a conference that I think is that good, a lot of them might beat up on each other. And I think the two that will likely stand tall at the end is, USC getting carried by Caleb Williams. But even against Utah, we saw, a quarterback can, who's only himself with no defense can only carry you so far. If Washington and Oregon weren't in the same division, well, they don't do divisions anymore. Honestly, I think even Washington is a more complete team than USC. So I think they might even have a better chance than USC does, because especially people are going to be gunning for Caleb Williams this year. But I think Oregon is the team that has the best chance, and I think they're the most complete team out there.
Yeah, here I am saying Washington or USC, completely disrespecting the two-time defending Pac-12 champs Utah. There's a lot of really good teams. That's why I'm not right now. I might change my mind, but right now I'm not going to project a playoff appearance from a Pac-12 team because of the quality at the top. I think you're going to see a lot of 9-3, 10-2 teams, and it's just going to be they're just going to beat each other up a little bit too much. So that's where I'm at right now. But man, if you're ranking maybe one of the more fun conferences to watch, Pac-12 could be at the very top of your list. And there's quite a few Heisman hopefuls there, which is very exciting. So that's probably good enough for our recap. Hopefully, we're not disrespecting the Pac-12 too much there, but we'll get into the ACC. But before we do, Cody texts me this week and says that he has got some spicy takes about the NFL draft, about the combine, about pro days. I don't know where he's going to go with this. So Cody, just lay it on me, and we'll see if I agree or not.
Dude, the combine sucks, man. I don't get it. It is fun to go watch there is an aspect that's enjoyable of watching these guys and see where their measurables are. We never see any other time where guys are getting their bench press measured, their 40-yard dash, the shuffle drills, watching them catching some routes. But everything is scripted. You could be a terrible football player, but if someone wanted to, they could probably train for 5 years just doing the things they do at the combine, and all of a sudden everyone's going to be like, "Look at this dude! This dude looks amazing!" They're just drills. It's blowing me away. The biggest thing that is driving me crazy about the combine is how does Anthony Richardson go from a third or fourth round pick to all of a sudden a combine happens with no defense, and he just happens to look like a linebacker playing quarterback and does basically the Jamarcus Russell, get on your knees, throw it 60 yards or whatever. And now all of a sudden we think he might even be the second quarterback taken in this draft. I don't get how this idea of doing these scripted drills with no defense, you get to do them in rhythm, there's no pressure or anything, in terms of a team pressuring you. There's pressure of all the scouts watching, but not physical pressure. I don't get how all of a sudden that just changes what we all of a sudden think about a player, specifically quarterbacks. It's so upsetting. And then honestly, pro days, you're even more in a bubble because you're doing it at a place where you practice always, and you've got your guys and your systems and everything. Just I don't know. It is bonkers to me how that can do it, because I'll even say it, even for CJ Stroud, I know CJ Stroud's strengths. I know his weaknesses. I know the things that I think make him great. I know the things that really kind of bugged me while he was at Ohio State. And even with that, all of a sudden, he was went from first round to potentially the number one overall pick. And, I even said this on a pod with you, Travis, and Cody, where I was like, we've seen the film. Bryce Young is the number one overall pick. When you watch the film, it is so obvious that it's Bryce Young. The Panthers traded up for Bryce Young. And so I don't know. I don't get how all these things that aren't in a game are allowed to determine where guys get drafted.
Well, I think that's just the difference between bad GMs and good GMs. Because, yeah, if you were drafting a guy almost solely on their combine performance, I actually saw an article today of a football player for Michigan State. He actually transferred from Michigan, and he's pretty absent on the football field, doesn't have a lot of production, really only started maybe 1 year and had injuries. But his pro day was historic. He's like 6'3", 240 pounds, plays linebacker, and he jumped. His vertical leap was like 43 inches. He ran like a sub 4.5. Everything he did was just astronomically great. And now people are saying he's going to get drafted. But he's had 4 years of tape that he could barely get on the field for Michigan State.
See that I can understand why the combine, can be helpful for some, but to me that's also very circumstantial. Like my big thing is like all of a sudden the combine is now determining like top 5, top 3 picks. Like to me that blows my mind because those picks are guys that played all throughout college and they're supposed to be ready to go. Like a guy like, who is the Michigan State player?
I'm blanking on his name right now. I could probably get it in about 2 minutes, but
okay. But even with that, like I said, like the combine,
Ben Van Sumeren, there it is.
There you go. So, the combine is great for like, hey, I didn't get a chance to play on the field. Let me show you what I can do. So that way, some GMs be like, okay, look at that guy's strength and speed. Let's draft him late, or let's sign him as an undrafted free agent on a practice squad, and let's see now what he does against other players. Like in that regard, I think the combine is great, but just how we let it determine that, because I mean, like. I don't know. Because I like going all the way back to some of these big whiffs on quarterbacks. Like if the combine wasn't there, I don't think Jamarcus Russell gets drafted number 1 that year. It doesn't become like the biggest bust of all time. And so
going back to Anthony Richardson, I'm not convinced that the combine is 100%. I think people, based on just his one Utah game, were ready to draft him in the first round. Going back to, I think that the Van Sumeren issue is, yeah, I mean, like if you want to throw a 7th round pick on a guy at that point, who cares? But before the pro day, literally no one had him on their radar at all. On the other side of it, I'm going to use a Michigan example. Aiden Hutchinson, his tape was really, really good, but some scouts had questions like, can he do this? What he does in college, would he be able to translate to the pro level? They go to the Georgia tape where he was not as dominant. He was still good against Georgia, but he wasn't as dominant as he was like against Ohio State or basically any other Big Ten team. And then his combine, he worked out at an elite level. All his numbers were explosive. And I think that confirms what you were able to see on the tape. I think that's a good use of the combine. Another example, a Lion, Malcolm Rodriguez, was a 6th round pick as a linebacker. He tested incredibly well. He had incredible tape, but he fell because of his size. He's sub 6 foot, on the lighter side, and so a lot of people overlooked him, but he had great tape, great instincts, and obviously elite speed, and he's a starter now for the Lions. So I think that there's right and a wrong way to use it. I think your example of valuing like a Jamarcus Russell or Anthony Richardson is completely an overreaction. Or you could go like any Raider wide receiver. They would always draft the guy who ran the fastest 40. That is terrible job by their GM, and you can see it hasn't helped them. So I don't mind the combine, but it does bug me, like you said, when guys get completely overrated just based on if they're fast. I think you need to be fast, you need to be strong, but there's this football thing that you have to be good at in addition to being an elite athlete.
Yeah, and some of it might even be overblown by just TV networks, ESPN, Fox, NFL networks, that's things that they can put on TV that's different than just talking about the last season or speculating. Yeah. It is actual things happening. I do think it's part of it, but yeah, it drives me crazy how like it can end up being the determining factor. Like I said, in my opinion, I think it shouldn't, like, to make it be more of what the purpose should be, it shouldn't even be televised. it shouldn't be televised. It should just be a private thing. Because, like I said, think about the workouts that, because like I told you, like for some reason I find myself listening to Detroit Lions talk all the time.
Join us.
I know Jalen Carter was just up in Detroit and like had a private workout, and no one knows how that workout went. But apparently it sounded like the GM said they liked what they saw, and they said it confirmed some things that they were thinking about. They got to see him work in person. I think that's great, but it just I don't get how teams, like I said, like they're supposed to be professionals. Like these GMs are supposed to be professionals. I don't get how they get suckered into combine numbers for the top elite players when tape was going. Because I'm glad Aiden Hutchinson had to do it, but I mean, like I think for the Lions, I think they knew before the combine if Aiden was there, that was their guy. Like you said, the combine may have just made them feel a little better about it because they're like, okay, he at least didn't show up and didn't come out slow, I think the Lions knew, like when their season was over, they said if Aiden Hutchinson isn't taken number one, he's getting taken number two.
I think you're probably right there. And I think what you said when you said it probably confirmed, which I think is how it should be used. Where on the flip side, the Jaguars, who passed on Aiden Hutchinson to draft the Georgia linebacker who tested just abnormally freaky, but I think in both of our opinions, he was maybe the third or fourth best defender on Georgia's defense that year. That's the wrong way to use the combine. Yeah. But I'm thankful for it because my team benefited by getting a franchise defensive end.
And Walker, here's the thing. Walker wasn't like bad this last year. He just was what the tape showed. Like he just was. Like because the player who dropped, who played like a top 5 pick was Nakobe Dean. Like I don't know how the Eagles ended up with Nakobe Dean, and clearly it paid dividends for them to just let guys drop. Because like I said, because I remember watching the Michigan-Georgia game, it felt like every third play, all we heard was Nakobe Dean, Nakobe Dean. And if you're a GM, it's like, why is that not the ultimate factor? And maybe behind closed doors it is, but just so many things keep getting out that just like you hear guys all the time come up that just like. Okay, like I will rant one little thing about, because I do have honestly a bunch of criticisms of CJ Stroud. But I do have one thing that like I will defend him on that I'm getting really sick and tired of hearing. All of a sudden we're starting to hear all this talk that Will Levis is likely going to get drafted above CJ Stroud. And the first thing, even from the monster himself, Mel Kiper Jr., the first defense in going to Will Levis over CJ Stroud was, well, he's not throwing to 4- and 5-star recruits. Well, who cares? I mean, that matters a little bit, but to some degree, those top players are what you're playing with in the NFL. You're playing with the best of the best. And just, I don't know, the idea that Will Levis isn't throwing to 4- and 5-star recruits and he looks like a massive human being at the combine, I'm just like, how is that enough to put him over Stroud, who is just clearly so much more accurate, has much more anticipation, and his deep ball is just better. Like Will Levis will probably be fine, but Will Levis keeps getting all these Jake Locker comparisons. So I'm like, didn't teams learn their lesson after Jake Locker got drafted? Like, I don't know. And like I said, that conversation between Will Levis and CJ Stroud was never a thing until the combine happened. And then all of a sudden, well, CJ Stroud, this, and that. Like, okay, it's great that he was throwing to, Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka. But at the same time, like, those guys also weren't proven college players yet. Super talented, but, they weren't proven yet. They walked into their first years playing real time. When they were freshmen, Buka was getting kickoffs, and Harrison had like 8 receptions as a freshman. That's it. So, yeah, that little piece, like I said, that didn't even happen until the combine.
If Stroud is not the second quarterback drafted, or even in the top 2, I will be shocked. But it's happened before. We've seen it where the Bears draft Mitch Trubisky over a Pat Mahomes or even Deshaun Watson. So, these guys, they're not savants. They're regular Joes who have some pretty good connections. I think that you and I could be a GM and do an okay job. Do you have anything else on the draft or combine before we move on to the ACC preview?
I think I've said my point. Like, any rational person recognizes, there is value to the combine. I just how often every single year how it becomes so much more of a make or break for the guys that have so much film at the highest level. It really grinds my gears.
As a college football fan, I kind of enjoy it because I like to see which schools are constantly pumping out the most elite athletes. I find it really interesting, and just confusing but compelling. How did Michigan pump out DJ Turner, a 3-star, to run a 4.2 6.40, where out of high school he was not that fast? Whatever they're doing, blood doping or I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing something right with their strength program, where guys are just coming out fast. Or Alabama's always got those guys that are just insane athletes. It's just interesting to me to see the guys that come out every year, just freaks, all of them.
Yeah. To Michigan's credit too, I mean, something that they've never really had in a long time is just they're really starting to figure something out in their secondary with pumping guys out. I mean, look what they did with Mike Sanders-Steele. Dude was a wide receiver, and now that guy is going to get drafted next year, third round probably minimum, as a defensive back.
We'll see.
Will Johnson is better than DJ Turner probably.
Well, 100% is. I think that if he was draft eligible next year, I think we're looking at a first round pick, but we get him for at least another year after this. So, Sanders-Steele, we'll see. I think he's a guy that's going to have to test well because he's on the small side. I think he's 5'10", and maybe 180, so pretty small dude, but he's got the instincts. He's got the ball skills. Really quick, you're a Browns fan. Who do you want the Browns to select first pick in the NFL draft?
So we might not even have a pick until the third round.
Oh,
if I'm not mistaken, because we traded a second round pick to get Elijah Moore.
I forgot about all these trades you guys made.
So, but honestly, it's so weird. The Browns right now are honestly built to win now, but we just got to stop being the Browns. We've got great talent, but the one thing we have had for a while was a great 1-2 punch at running back, and we don't have that now. So this will be a familiar name. If Zach Charbonnet is there in the third round, I really want the Cleveland Browns to take him.
He's a dude. He's a guy that I think he's going to be a fantastic running back.
He is, and I think he's a great compliment to Nick Chubb. Because I think they're similar, but yet they both have a couple things they do a little differently.
What happened to Kareem Hunt?
We have either released him or we are letting his contract go in, or he's sitting out. But I was listening to a show recently, and they were just talking about how Kareem Hunt is not gearing up, not getting ready to do anything. I can check on that here for a second, but something's going on that he is just not. Because he's a free agent right now.
Okay,
he's a free agent. He's not even on a team. He's a free agent.
I think I am talking myself into, if he's there, selecting him, baggage and all, taking Jalen Carter at 6. I think a lot of Lions fans are very hesitant since he came to his pro day. He couldn't finish his workouts. He was 10 pounds overweight. Obviously, he had the legal issues with the car crash and getting arrested. There's question marks there, but I think there's a potential of him being a number 1 overall type talent at a position of need. I think I'm going to take the gamble, but I think a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that.
I think Carter's a no-brainer if he's there for the Lions. I think they're dying for him to be there. That Tyree Wilson dude from Texas Tech is not a bad get either. I think the Lions are going to get a pick at either one of those guys, and I think either one of them would be really great to pair off with Aiden.
Cities.
I would if they're both available, I would take Jalen Carter first still, but I think they're both good gets, and the likelihood is they're both going to be there, especially because I honestly am really buying into the Texans taking Will Anderson because D'Amico Ryans is a defensive guy.
No, they got to take a quarterback. Well,
okay, listen. So just real quick before we move on, DeMeco Ryans, defensive guy. Will Anderson, special talent. I think he's like, let's get the best player available, Will Anderson. The 49ers are starting to shop Trey Lance. I could see the Texans trading for Trey Lance.
Ooh. I guess that's a kind of a two birds, one stone situation. Man, I don't know if I'm ready to, if I was the Texans, just take a swing on Trey Lance to say, be our franchise quarterback. But
I mean, remember, DeMeco was there. DeMeco was in the room with him. So
yeah, that's true.
So there is that fact. Like, DeMeco Ryans knows what Trey Lance is capable of. He saw it at practice every day.
Well, the best scenario for my Lions is all the quarterbacks get taken to take up those early picks. So I'm hoping that they pass on Will Anderson. I still have a dream scenario in my head where somehow Will Anderson drops, the Lions select Will Anderson, and then trade up to, like, say, pick 8 and select Jalen Carter as well to form the greatest front seven in the NFL.
My thought process is the Lions have so much draft capital. Why are they not trading up to number 2 to get Will Anderson?
I think it's being explored, but I would say their biggest need is that defensive tackle.
I think you could trade the number 6 in a next year's first round pick and get Will Anderson, because if you're looking at it, you're in a win now thing.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at it as, okay, we're basically spending next year's first, because you're moving up. Okay, we're using next year's first round because, you know, the Lions are not in a position where they should be saving or do more. Like, it is go time. You've got all this draft capital. I think they need to make a big move on draft day. So I think if they could trade up for Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, I think that's the move to do. They should be traded up to 2 or 3 to get one of these guys, because the cornerbacks are so deep in this draft. You could get one at 18 and still get a starter at 18.
Yeah, I'm definitely not opposed to trading up to get your guy. The city's dying for a hero. Let's move on to the ACC. I teased you earlier. You're kind of anti-Florida State because of the amount of publicity they've gotten. Right or wrong, a lot of people are pushing them as a top 10 team. Maybe some pushing them as a top 4 team. Let's just start. Where do you place them amongst the conferences? We've already covered that you had the Pac-12 at 1 or 2. Where's the ACC fall?
5th.
That was confident.
I think the bottom half of the ACC is just some of the worst college football has to offer.
I think you're right there. I'm struggling with where to place them because I'm not projecting a playoff team from the Pac-12. I could very much see a playoff team coming out of this ACC, even though the rest of the conference is so weak. I think that's going to benefit them with their no divisions coming up this year. You're going to have teams like Clemson, like Florida State, playing a somewhat weaker schedule just based on the quality of the conference, and most likely having at max maybe 1 loss and then a conference championship. It's going to be hard to keep them out.
That's one of the major flaws of the 14 playoff is it does not get the 4 best teams. It doesn't get the 4 best teams every single year. We know that. And so, if Clemson was able to run the table, which, you know, I do think Clemson is coming in number 1 this year. This is not Trevor Lawrence Clemson, but I do think this Clemson team will be higher than they've been the last couple years since they haven't had him. I do think this will be their best team post Trevor and Deshaun. But they're not that powerhouse where you're just like, okay, they're obviously going undefeated into the playoff, you know, like they did for basically 3 straight years. And I think they're definitely suspect to drop. I mean, I don't think Clemson is built to, even in an easy conference, I don't think they're built to go undefeated in the regular season. And I think they have to do their best to try not lose 2 regular season games, just like they did last year.
I think that I'm going to place them at the 4th spot. Like I said, I think that there's 2 teams that have a good, real opportunity to make the 14 playoff. And I can't say that about some other conferences. So I'm going to put them at that 4th spot. You're talking up Clemson there. Are you going to say that Clemson is your preseason favorite over Florida State or anybody else in this conference to come out ahead? It's not a hot take, but just right now, are you going to say
Florida State's not even in my top 2 in the conference?
Oh my gosh. There he is. All right, so you got Clemson and then you got who?
North Carolina.
Ooh, that's bold. That is very bold.
UNC will be number 2.
They're losing their offensive coordinator.
Yep.
They have a trash defense. Is Drake May just that good?
Honestly, yes. I think so.
Oh,
and in the
man.
ACC, they're going to clean up, and all they got to do is be on top of it at the right time, because Florida State or Clemson is not a protected rivalry for them. I can even pull up their schedule right here, looking in 2023. And so they do have to play at Clemson late in the year, but they don't play Florida State. They avoid FSU, but North Carolina does have to go at Clemson. That's the second to last game of the season. That could be a huge game. That could actually be a really big game.
Do they have any other tough games?
They get Miami at home. Their first ACC game is at Pitt, and so Pitt. I think Pitt has firmly established themselves at, what would we call it? If you split the ACC into thirds, maybe Pitt is like at the very bottom of the top third or the top of the second third. Mm-hmm. I think Pitt has kind of started to solidify themselves there. But honestly, at Pitt is their second toughest game of the season. Other road games are NC State. They lost Devin Leary. They're at Georgia Tech, and they're at Clemson. Those are their 4 away games.
Their first game is versus South Carolina.
Yeah, and then
that's
they do
tough.
play Minnesota. They play Minnesota 2 weeks later.
I'm down on Minnesota this year, but I'll save that for the Big Ten. But I think the opener against South Carolina is one they could easily drop. I guess it is home, which helps, and that's not a conference game. I guess I shouldn't really care about that too much. But
I actually do believe North Carolina will lose that game.
It's probably one that would be. I probably would pick South Carolina, and I'm not a South Carolina truther, but yeah, I guess conference-wise, it's not tough.
I mean, I would call North Carolina the favorite in every single ACC game they have, besides the game at Clemson. And so what happens when they win all those games? Except they only lose to Clemson. They go. I think there's only 8 conference games for them. So when they're 7-1, and Clemson and Florida State have to play each other because they are a protected rivalry now in this divisionless ACC. I think that's smooth sailing for North Carolina right there. I think the only big thing is they do have to go to NC State the last game, so they are on the road back-to-back games. And so if they're really high on Clemson, but then they lose and then they can't recover, that might come back to hurt them. But they've got a really easy schedule that's setting up for them to go 7-1 in the ACC and be one of those top 2 teams. Because like I said, Clemson, Florida State play each other. That's already a guaranteed loss for one of those 2 teams. And then the question is, can Florida State or Clemson find a way to win out the rest of their games?
Yeah, I was not aware that the schedule sets up as well as it does. But even so, with in my opinion, one of the worst defenses in college football, and I think you do take a step back offensively without their offensive coordinator, I think they'll find a way to drop a game in there somewhere where now they've got the 2 conference losses potentially, and that could keep them out. We'll see. Going to those top 3, Clemson, UNC, Florida State.
Yep, I will put Florida State at 3rd, even though if you were here for the last pod and got through it, I am not a fan of the hype that they are getting. I don't think they're a bad team. I just don't think they're anything of this hype. But my 4th team, who I am a little high on, who I think could be a sleeper in the ACC, and they've got a decently favorable schedule, is Louisville. I think Louisville has got a nice schedule setting up for them come this season, and Louisville does not have to play Clemson or Florida State, I believe, in the regular season.
Oh, that is very favorable.
Yeah, I'm trying to find them just to confirm that. As I'm clicking on links, I thought I clicked on them, but Yeah, they do not have Florida State, Clemson, or North Carolina. Louisville doesn't play any of those three teams. And so that's I think they're the wild card in that, because the way the schedule is set up, they're not playing any of them.
So we've got a sleeper. In the conference, do you see a Heisman?
I mean, Drake May, I think, obviously, is a Heisman contender for sure. He's got every potential. I'm not sold on Cade Klubnik as a Heisman contender. I am sold on him as a quality college football quarterback. I think a great way to compare him to is, this past season, J.J. McCarthy was not a Heisman contender, but he was more than a college quality quarterback. I think I would put Cade Klubnik in that same level where JJ was this past season. I do think JJ McCarthy is a Heisman contender going into this next season. I think Cade is where JJ was going into his sophomore year. I think that's where I would put Cade Klubnik on that. And so Jordan Travis remains to be seen. I'm not going to shut it down right now, just in case in the off chance I have to eat those words later on.
I was baiting you. I wanted to hear you just shut down. I know that you were down on him last time.
I don't see him as a Heisman guy. I can see him, making good plays against the mediocre to decent teams and doing that, but I don't see Jordan Travis making the big plays in the big games.
I like the JJ comp, because if you put the production, the quality of what JJ was last year on Clemson last year, I think that they're probably making the playoffs. And so
I'd say so.
I think that does kind of inform, because honestly, I'm still going back and forth between Florida State and Clemson, but I'm going to go ahead and put my pick in. My champ for the ACC is going to be Clemson. I think that their offense is going to be improved. If Cade Klubnik lives up to that steady description you just gave, where he's going to not lose games, because, man, DJ, he had some rough games. Cade Klubnik had some rough games. That Notre Dame game comes to mind. If he's able to elevate his play and just be a plus college quarterback, I think Clemson, with their defense, they're going to probably be the best team. If they lose one game, I think they're probably making the playoffs. So I'm tentatively picking Clemson to win the ACC and to secure, I'll say, the 4 seed in the college football playoff.
Clemson does have arguably the toughest ACC schedule this year, though. They have North Carolina on their schedule. They have Florida State. They have Miami. They have Wake Forest. They have NC State.
Those last 3 don't scare me at all.
But, I mean, okay, but at some point you still have to rank the rest of them, because we know there's only 2 or 3 real quality teams in the ACC. So at some point you've got to recognize, okay, maybe those aren't anything, but are NC State, Miami, and Wake Forest probably in the top half of the conference, or at least in that second, third? Probably. They've only got one team on their schedule that I would put in that bottom third, and that's Georgia Tech. And so, I mean, so they probably do have the toughest now. Like I said, is it a barn burner of a schedule? Not at all, but they do have the toughest schedule. So let's say Clemson beats Florida State, and Florida State drop one more. They went 6-2. And then all of a sudden UNC steps in. Let's say North Carolina found a way to upset Clemson, and then you've got Louisville sitting there who doesn't play either of those 3 teams. So, I mean, there's a really interesting scenario where Clemson only drops 1 game. Florida State drops 1 game outside of Clemson, and neither of them are in the ACC title game. Isn't that kind of wild to think about? That's not so unrealistic.
You're pretzeling my brain right now.
Because if UNC beat Clemson, then they've got a game to give.
Right.
They've got a game to give. Louisville will be the interesting one. Is if Louisville and Clemson were both 7-1, is what would be the tiebreaker between them? Because neither because they don't play head to head. So I'd be really, is it ranking? Does ranking determine that? Because if so, I'd be really upset because if they have the same record, Clemson's going to be ranked higher than Louisville just because
their name.
That's how rankings work in college football.
Yeah. Man, the more you talk about it, I honestly would have pegged ACC as probably the more boring conference, probably the most boring Power 5 conference. But as you start, matching these games up, it's going to be pretty interesting to see who does emerge, what upsets happen. I'm not completely sold yet on Louisville. I'm a big Jeff Brom believer, but I think, give him some time before you expect him to maybe win the conference. And UNC, I'm going to hold off again on them, but they'll be fun to watch. So do you have an official pick for me? Who's coming out? And if so, are they making the playoff?
I do still think it's going to be Clemson.
Okay.
Even with everything I just said, I do still think it's going to be Clemson, and I'm in agreement with you. I think at 11-1 this year, they're going to find a way to get the 4th seat in the playoff.
All right, so that's pod unity right there. So that gives me some confidence. Maybe we're on the right track. We'll maybe see how this goes throughout the year. I would be more than happy if the Clemson dynasty kind of fell off personally, but I think that they get back on track. Not all the way back on track, but enough back on track to make some noise in the college football playoff. That's all I got for the ACC. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think that pretty much covers it because, we know they're not a top-heavy conference, but yet, there's really only a few teams to focus on. Like I said, for me, I think my surprise team that could do it based off of new coach, transfer QB, and their schedule setting up is Louisville. I do think they'll be intriguing to watch. Now, we'll see if, do they drop a couple bad games early on and it just erases it. But in terms of ACC play and not non-conference, I do think Louisville will be intriguing because I do think they'll at minimum be in the picture. It might be they need things to fall their way to get in at the end, but they'll be intriguing to watch just because of their schedule. And the ACC is not exactly loaded with defenses. So if Jack Plummer brings any quality and they just have a high-flying pass attack that can't be stopped, other teams aren't going to keep up with them.
Well, we'll look forward to watching that. At this point, I would watch any football, ACC, Sun Belt, MAC. Just give it to me. So I'm looking forward to the ACC. We have them ranked low as a conference, but still making the playoff. They're gonna be relevant. So,
I got one last question for you.
Yeah, shoot.
Is the American Athletic Conference better than the ACC?
No. Tulane did beat USC, which is your Pac-12, but I don't think that they would match up the best of the ACC or AAC. I don't think that they match up well, especially with these teams from the AAC moving to the Big 12.
Is that starting this year or next year?
I thought that was starting this year, but I could be wrong. Either way,
I do feel like I heard one time they mentioned that the Big 12 is like 16 teams this year or something like that, or 14 teams or something like that.
Even leaving in Cincinnati, UCF, I don't think that they match up with the quality of a Clemson and even a Florida State. I know Florida State has been down and they're kind of on the way up, but just looking at the talent that these programs bring in, it's on another level compared to these AAC teams. So yes, no disrespect to them, but we're talking about, Clemson is not far removed from arguably being the best program in college football. So I think that's a bridge too far for me. But yeah, a lot of respect for the AAC. I love watching them, and I cheer for them basically any time because it's, the David and Goliath factor, and they play the part of David very well.
Yeah, they always have.
We'll see. Maybe the AAC makes me choke on my words a bit, and they come again and they enter that New Year's Six game, and maybe it's the AAC versus the ACC, and we're wrong. Maybe the ACC doesn't make the playoff, and then they just smack them again. We'll see.
That'd actually be awesome if that happened now, just because we said it. Like if we come full circle,
Definitive
now all of a sudden
answer.
It's like it's like for everyone else, it's going to be the least exciting.
We'll be locked in.
Year 6, and we're like, we are hyped for this matchup.
All right, well let's wrap up with this. Some spring game thoughts. I was able to get. I actually was in person for the Michigan spring game, and then for OSU, I watched the recap. Got to see most of that one. So let's start with Ohio State. What did you see that maybe encouraged you? What did you see that makes you think maybe we're not gonna be the team we need to be this year?
So the encouraging thing for me is I'm not taking any major takes with this, but the defense looks faster. Like to me, like it felt like the defense was always getting to the ball very quickly. I think one of the big things that Ohio State still has to overcome is you can be there all you want. If you can't bring them down, you can't bring them down.
Right.
But at the same time, if more guys are getting on the ball quicker rather than us playing the matchups that we do and constantly leaving guys in one-on-one situations, if we're able to fly all over the field and, be the silver bullets that used to be there, that's encouraging. Like I said, I outside of Georgia, I don't think anyone's defense is going to be just manhandling through and being the cause of why teams win, but having a defense that can make plays and shut teams down in big moments is something that's key. And, I think Ohio State is hopefully taking steps in the right direction. I think they learned a lot from the Michigan game. We didn't like the defense last year was fine, nothing special, but fine. I think in the Michigan game, they didn't stay true to just what we have been doing the whole year. I think they tried to be too smart. And then I think once Michigan caught on to what we were doing, like literally just putting everyone up, Harbaugh was like, all right, JJ, just loft the ball so that way receivers can get on it. They started cutting deep, and then all of a sudden when we sat back, then that running game really exposed us. So I'm hoping this year they learn to just trust in the guys they have and not have to overthink anything. Just be a defense that is what it is. And if an offense is doing something good, then you adjust then. But don't make adjustments that don't have to be made yet that actually cost you a game. But the speed of the defense is encouraging. I'm still physicality and consistent tackling remain to be seen. But I like the speed that I saw. That was good to see. Offensive line, I think, is my biggest question I have for this team going forward. Losing Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones were big ones, and then I was a little surprised when Luke Whippler ended up going pro. I thought we were going to have him for one more year, so that was a tough one to lose him there. And so we're replacing our tackles and our center, which is not easy to do. And so we didn't really have someone step up and emerge to take it. Zen Mikulski is supposed to kind of be the biggest recruit that we've had recently that is supposed to step up, and Josh Fryer is another one that they've talked about. But we don't have a Paris Johnson in the room right now, which is surprising. The one thing Ohio State has always had is a solid left tackle, like a first round left tackle. And so for the first time in a long time, we don't have that first round left tackle. And so it's pretty concerning to not have a guy like that in the room. And so the transfer window just opened up. So I've heard if Ohio State does pull the trigger, they're going to try and get another offensive tackle, but any of the ones that matter were already gone. Any guy that leaves after the spring game is because they're not happy where they are on the depth chart. Yeah. Not because they're like, okay, I was at a mid-major, NFL scouts are liking me, I'm going to go to a big-time program and win a Power 5 and have a chance at a playoff and be a first-round pick.
Well, is Ohio State a kind of program that they could maybe poach a guy and say, hey, we're going to pay you X amount of NIL dollars because we are short a left tackle or right tackle in order to win a championship, and you could be that missing piece?
You would think so. And then there was that story report that came out last year that said Georgia outbid us like crazy because apparently we didn't have the NIL money. We were offering someone like $500,000, $600,000, and Georgia was like $1.8 million. So I mean, So we've actually already proven that no, that's not the case. Apparently, we're not in position to do that. So, and that's another thing that's a little concerning. Is I don't think that. I mean, Ohio State and Michigan have similar NIL models. That our NIL is made to pay the guys who are proving themselves. Like, I'm sure Blake Corum is about to make ridiculous amounts of money.
Yes, he is.
This next year. Stroud and Jackson Smith and Jigba were our two biggest money getters last year because they were proven guys. And so I think that's Michigan and Ohio State's NIL structure. So it is interesting to see 3, 4, 5 years down the road how that has paid off compared to these schools like Texas A&M and Miami, Florida, that have just thrown out ridiculous amounts of cash at high schoolers who have never played college football before. And so like that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The last other thing was I would give Kyle McCord a C grade on the spring game. He didn't do anything to wow us. He didn't do anything to like be like the job is his, you know. He didn't do one thing that stuck out that I'm like, okay, that's the one thing that Kyle McCord does really well. You know, I think he's a good passer. You know, he's not a running quarterback, but I think he's got enough mobility that if he had to escape out of a pocket, he maybe could. You know, he's got proven chemistry with Marvin Harrison Jr. They were high school teammates, and so there is kind of nice. But everyone knows that Devin Brown is the better athlete. He's a little bigger, and he's got a nice arm. We've seen Devin Brown throw the ball, so I think everyone was really excited to see Devin Brown play. And so I think there was a big damper on everything when Devin Brown didn't get to play in the spring game. Until that happened, I think Brown. I was starting to lean towards. I think Devin Brown was going to be the starter, and I still think that's possible. But we'll see.
So
we'll see on that. So
who's your betting favorite to take the opening day snap?
I mean, at this moment, Kyle McCord, but I think Devin Brown has more upside.
That just reminded me that I believe you owe me a burrito from our last bet that Cade McNamara would take the opening snap for the Michigan Wolverines last year. Although that was a little bit lucky with the way that Harbaugh structured that competition. Pretty much everything that you took away from your spring game is the points I took away. The defense did look impressive. They definitely had the advantage. It did warm this Wolverines' heart to see Kyle McCord, who was not allowed to be tackled, running for his life behind that offensive line. That's definitely a big concern for Ohio State, and something that Michigan could be licking their chops over because our defensive line in our spring game looked pretty nasty. But yeah, the defense did look, they were flying around. Defensive line got into the backfield. Defensive backs, I think you got to feel pretty, I think they've improved since last year.
The transfers we got are a big deal, I think. Jahad Carter and the Ole Miss guy. I'm not even going to pretend. Ube Golson or whatever.
Igbinosin, I think. And yeah. he was a huge target for Michigan. I thought we had him, and next thing you know, he's visiting Ohio State and commits. And I was like, wait, what? I thought he's supposed to be Wolverine.
That was a big deal. That was a really, really big get because we are hoping that Denzel Burke can be the guy that we recruited him to be this next year. And if Ube Golson, or you said it more right than I did, if he can be another big guy, we have big confidence in Jahad Carter kind of being that strong safety. And we do have Josh Proctor back, who is a freak athlete. And if we got two quality corners and Jahad Carter, who's the guy who's always just in position, we're hoping that just leaves Josh Proctor to kind of be that dude, go hawk the ball, run where the ball is. And so I think the team like Lathan Ransom a lot, but I'm a lot higher on Josh Proctor than I am Lathan Ransom.
And they're playing the same position?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're both have more free safety. So.
Well, that was my big takeaway is defensive backs. I thought that they looked pretty improved from what I saw last year. So we'll see. You're playing yourself in the spring game, so it's hard to take sweeping takeaways. But we kind of took the same things away from Ohio State. On the Michigan side, I sat in the stands on that cold day. I remember Cody, my brother Cody Jones, sitting next to me, literally just shaking. Did not dress for the occasion. So, big takeaway from Michigan. The team is deep. A lot of the stars did not even dress for this game. Donovan Edwards, Blake Corum. Some of the receivers did dress, but they played 1 or 2 series. And we really mostly got an extended look at the 2s and 3s. And they impressed. Defensive line, I think, is where I saw the most impressing players. We have a transfer that came from actually Coastal Carolina, Josiah Stewart, who looked like just a banshee screaming off the edge. He was constantly in the backfield and is a guy that I think we could be really excited about. So defense, just like Ohio State, was pretty exciting. JJ didn't play much, but when he did play, he looked solid. He opened the game with a bad interception and then settled down after that. I hope that's maybe a sign of things to come where the offense or the coaches just let him get into a rhythm. I think they didn't really let him do that last year. Gotta like what you saw from him. And pretty much across the board, I think you're looking at a team that is just increasing its depth, it's increasing its skill. You have to feel really good, I think, if you're a Wolverine fan. Although, spring game's 2 or 3 weeks in the rearview mirror at this point. I think that was way back on April 1st. So we're already moving on to bigger and better things. But good stuff. I think the biggest concern was the cornerback spot. We mentioned that Ohio State beat us for the Ole Miss transfer, Igbinosun. But our second cornerback, Amurian Walker, he had a ton of hype, and he spent the entire day getting torched by our former walk-on, Peyton O'Leary. I think there's a pretty big concern that if he's our second cornerback that's starting, that could be maybe the one weak link in our defense. Everywhere else is pretty solid, but that's the only position I think that even the coaches admit we have to develop better there. And they're saying, maybe he'll kind of get the hang of it by mid-season. But even in the beginning of the season, I think it's going to be a rough sledding. So that's maybe the one takeaway. Other than that, I think there's a lot of things to like. There's a third string running back. He's a freshman, Benjamin Hall, that really no one really knew that much about. And then he ran for like 100 yards. So pretty good showing on April 1st for the Wolverines, but once again, you can't take that much away from a spring game, but it's good to get excited, and I think that kind of brings us into our summer look ahead. We'll start talking about some of these other conferences. We still have to cover the Big 10, the Big 12, and the SEC. Anything else, Cody?
I think because this is just kind of a thought I'm having about. I'll have one thought and then one question for you. The thought I have is I think going into next offseason, the most intriguing storyline for Michigan is going to be, are they a reload program or not?
Yes.
Are they a rebuild or reload program? Because, like I said, there is a lot of young guys, but there's a lot of guys this is their last season, that are either juniors and they're probably going pro after this. Because I think JJ's taking his chance. He seems like a guy that continuously wants to prove himself, and so I think when he's NFL eligible, I think he's going to be going off to the NFL. If he doesn't, good for him. Stay, make the most of it. But I do honestly think he's going to go pro. Corum is gone. I think Donovan Edwards will have enough to go pro. And as a running back, the best thing you can do is show that you didn't have too much wear and tear.
Right.
Doing that over 3 years instead of 4. So I think it'll be very interesting to see if Michigan is a reload program or if, there's not going to be a drop-off. There's not going to be a drop-off, but are they going to reload and be ready to defend a Big Ten title, which at this point, on my predictions, 3-time Big Ten champs. Are they going to be ready to defend that?
I think it's going to depend on your definition because I hate to call a shot and sound completely arrogant, but in my opinion, this is going to be Harbaugh's most talented team.
Yes,
and
I agree.
I think with that, the culture they've built, with their focus, I think that they do have unfinished business after losing a very winnable game against TCU. I think this is a team that does defend its its Big Ten championship. I think they're able to beat the Buckeyes this year. And at minimum, I think that you're looking at a team that should be playing for a national championship. I don't know that you can say that they will win because, you get to that point, you're facing a really good team. But I think that they reach that mountaintop. They might not plant the flag, but I think they get there. And like you said, there's going to be a mass exodus of talent. I think they'll still be a good team. But, man, you're down a Heisman caliber quarterback. You're down your top 2 pass catchers, your top 2 rushers, your offensive line, a lot of your defense. That's almost like not just reloading. You're like having to rebuild your entire gun. So yeah. I think that you're looking at probably a definite step back in 2024 where maybe they could be a 9-3, 10-2 team and still be good. And, at that point you're relevant, but you're not nationally challenging. And that's kind of my opinion, unless you see some of those guys not have as good of a year as you hope. JJ could return. If JJ returns, I think that changes the equation. But I can't say confidently that they would be at the same tier as the Ohio State or Penn State after losing. In my opinion, they could set a record for players drafted next year.
Yeah, they could. Yeah, I think that'll be very, very intriguing to see once we get to this time next year. So I got one question for you.
Let me piggyback off that really quick. Because my opinion is that they would take at least a small step back. If Ryan Day loses this upcoming matchup, which I've just predicted, and you're Ohio State, do you at that point just say, Ryan Day, you're not getting it done? Or do you have the foresight to say Michigan is not, they're falling down and you're going to have an opportunity to get them next year? In your opinion, do you pull the trigger after a third consecutive loss? Or do you give him that opportunity to say, hey, we're going to look at the context here. Michigan will not be as good in 2024.
It depends, because what if we lose and we're in the playoff again?
Let's just say
if he gets to the playoff 2 years in a row, at the end of, as much as we want to make it about the rivalry, at the end of the day, for college coaches, it's about getting to the playoff. That's what it is. And so if he does that, and he will have, because if Ryan Day does that, if he gets to the playoff again, he will have gotten to the college football playoff 4 of his 5 years since he's been a head coach.
That's hard to fire a guy for that.
Exactly. And so
let's say they don't make the playoff then.
If they don't, he's still got there 3 out of 5 years.
So you're going to give him some more time?
I think so.
I
so.
Don't think,
especially because, to me, the only reason you could is if you know who the person is.
Okay.
You cannot just get rid of him for the sake of, we have to find someone to do it. No, you have to know, hey, okay, this is going to sound silly. The only way that would happen right now if Urban Meyer walked back in the door and said, I will do it. That's basically it. To me, there's even only one name out there who's even considerable, and I don't even know that it'd be a step up. But the only name out there to me that could be considered is Mike Vrabel.
I think Luke Fickell, if Wisconsin has a fantastic year, I think that could be a name to look at. But yeah, Mike Vrabel, but he's got to take a step down from the NFL. I also think you are maybe a little bit more level-headed on this. I personally think that the average Ohio State fan, if there's a third straight loss, is going to be ready to cut bait. And I think especially the message boards will be really fired up on that Saturday if things don't go the Buckeyes' way. But yeah, if I were you, I would have some perspective and say Michigan is going to have to replace literally everyone other than Will Johnson, who wouldn't be eligible next year. But one cornerback does not a championship team make. So what's your question? I'm sorry I cut you off.
Yeah, my last point about what you were saying too anyways was about that is my reasoning for it is, as much as being at OSU or Michigan is about the rivalry, you can't let them beat you more than once a year. And I think if you just allow them to fire a coach over that, it can really hurt you because, I mean, this, like I said, everyone can take it, but I was on that side of the fence, and going from Rich Rod to Brady Hoke was not a step up, you know? Brady Hoke went and did all the things with Rich Rod's players. And the moment that his guys were in the doors, he wasn't doing anything. And, even though Rich Rod had lost 3 straight years, they had literally improved by 2 games every single year. They literally improved. And so, like I said, we are losing to Michigan, but we're not taking a step back because the 2 years that we've lost, 1 year we were 5th and went to the Rose Bowl, and the other year we were 4th and went to the playoff. So Michigan has beaten us, but to me, Ohio State has not taken a step back. Michigan is just at that level now.
Yes,
that's
I
what
agree.
It is to me.
Yep.
And so since Ohio State has not taken a step back, there's no point because like I said, even if maybe Luke Fickell does it, I don't even know that Luke Fickell takes us farther than we are. I think with Luke Fickell, it's probably the same. It's probably the same with Ryan Day. It's probably the same, but Ryan Day is an even better offensive mind. So, I think for me, you stick with him for that reason. But anyways, my question, and like I said, I'm putting this out for intrigue of your point. I am not putting this out there for risk of bad luck or misfortune or anything, but I do think this is a legitimate just thing to talk about for a moment is the one thing that Ohio State has always had better in the last 10 years than Michigan is a backup QB ready to go if needed to be called on. So my question for you is, if JJ got hurt, is Michigan still a Big Ten playoff contending team?
Well, when you say playoff contending, you mean just to make the playoff?
To make the playoff, to win the Big Ten and make the playoff. Because obviously, the instance I'm using right now is 2014. Braxton Miller goes down, enter JT Barrett.
Right.
JT Barrett goes down, enter Cardale Jones. Now, we also know that is like the greatest example of a quarterback stepping up and being able to do something.
Yeah.
Like, that will never happen again. But at the same time, look what JT did as the second string. He had Ohio State in position to make the playoff and was 5th in the Heisman voting. So the question, like, my question for you is, like, is can Michigan still contend for a Big Ten championship and a chance to make the playoff if JJ got hurt week 4 to week 6 and was out?
Yes. The reason being is I think Ohio State's offense is very quarterback-centric. We've seen that where, Justin Fields has like 40 touchdowns, like 4,000 yards. What was his name before Fields? Haskins had like 5,000 yards and like 50 touchdowns. And then we see C.J. Stroud, who has, similar numbers. Ohio State is a quarterback-centric offense. Michigan is not. Just go through the Harbaugh era. The numbers have been very underwhelming, and yet in the past 2 years, the wins have come regardless of a quarterback needing to throw for 300-plus yards. In fact, in the games where quarterbacks throw for 300 yards or more, those are usually the games that Michigan is struggling to win. The games where Michigan really puts teams away, it's because they've leaned on the running game. And so with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, the best 1-2 punch in college football at running back, I would think that whoever they put back there, obviously the quality drops because JJ offers you the ability to pull the ball and run. He offers the ability to launch the ball down the field. However, I think any of the replacements for JJ would be able to still run the offense. I probably should have talked about in the spring game, we did get a pretty good look at the backups. JJ didn't play a ton. It seems like there's a battle right now for quarterback 2. And I would say, depending on who gets quarterback 2, answers this question. Because the battle is between Jack Tuttle, a transfer from Indiana. He's in his 6th year of eligibility.
Yeah, he's freaking old.
And between Davis Warren.
Do you know the story of Jack Tuttle? Do you know the story of Jack Tuttle, by the way?
I just know that he came from Utah, and then he went to Indiana, and now he's at Michigan. That's all I know.
So Ryan Day in
about
2017.
Olave. Yeah, I hate Jack Tuttle for that reason.
And Olave was the guy catching his passes, and that's where Chris Olave came from.
Yeah, so we have Jack Tuttle to thank for the discovery of Chris Olave, one of the smoothest route runners I've ever watched. The battle between Tuttle and Davis Warren and I guess you could say Alex Orji. If it's Tuttle, in my opinion, maybe we're not contributing or contending for the championship because he's a sixth-year guy. He hasn't caught on anywhere he's been. He is what he is. Whereas Davis Warren or Alex Orji, there is still untapped potential to grow. So like you said, if he gets hurt early in the season, we could see one of those guys kind of turn into a better version of themselves, where I think the potential meter is already tapped out for Jack Tuttle. And he's not going to be throwing to Chris Olave. So I'm really hoping to see it be Davis Warren or Alex Orji. Alex Orji, we have compared him on the Jonesing for Sports podcast to Joe Milton, where he has a cannon for an arm. He's an elite athlete. He looks more like a linebacker, but you've got to rein him in a bit. We were unable to do that with Joe Milton, but if they are able to do that with Alex Orji, you could have a real stud. So I really like what I saw from him. He played well. And Davis Warren is kind of like J.J. Light, where he's got a strong arm. He's mobile, but he's not quite as contact hungry as J.J. is, but he can move, and I really like him. So I think they could definitely compete. I don't think you're going from a J.T. Barrett to a Cardell Jones, but Michigan doesn't need that based on the type of offense they run.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So, because like I said, I don't really know. Like I've seen Jack Tuttle play in Indiana, but like I said, I don't know anything about the guys in house. So that was kind of the first time. That's the first time hearing that. Yeah, that's interesting to think about. Like I said, the goal for me I'm not trying to put bad Mojo or Chojo out there or whatever.
Unfortunately,
honestly, I think that's one of the most intriguing things. So
short of maybe like a bad sack, my prediction is that Michigan is not going to let JJ do a lot of running the ball. The schedule sets up incredibly favorably again, and so I think they're most likely going to let Alex Orji come in for some design runs. They're going to make sure JJ is healthy. And obviously it's football, anything can happen, but I think they're not going to really let him be the fully weaponized JJ we saw at the end of last year until the end of next year. So I think that they're going to handle him with some kid gloves again, and the risk of injury will be minimal, but obviously it's football, so we'll be hopeful that he's healthy all season long.
Yep.
All right, I think that about does it. Hopefully we'll be with you guys in the next couple weeks or so. We'll be talking more about some conference previews. If you have a specific conference you want to hear, or maybe something else about those conferences you'd like to hear, just give us some feedback. You can always let us know in the Jonesing for Sports Discord or tweet at us. But we appreciate you guys being with us today, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.